Hi guys, I'm Miss Lang. I'm going to be showing you how to use partial quotient to take your quadruple digit dividend divided by your double digit divisor. So today the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a piece of paper and a pencil or pen to get started. First thing that I do, and I always recommend for my students, is you want to orientate your paper portrait style. Then you're going to take a look at your top of your paper and you are going to make a fold about a third of the way. And then you are going to take your paper and you're going to fold it in half from top to bottom and open it back up. Now we're ready to get started by using our partial quotient. So our quadruple digit dividend is going to be 2,352, and we're going to be dividing by our double digit divisor, which will be 42 for this problem. We are going to be solving to find two partial quotients, which we will add together to find our final quotient. First things first, before I get started, I want to make sure that I underline our first three values in my quadruple digit dividend, which is, if I take away the ones place value, that would be 235. That's something to keep in the back of your mind, and I will tell you why in just a second. Next thing, we are going to actually use the opposite operation of division, which is multiplication. But first, we are going to take a look at our double digit divisor. I don't know about you, but I definitely do not know my multiples of 42 off the top of my head. We're in luck though, because as you know, multiplication is repetitive addition, and that is what we're going to use to be able to get as close to 235 as possible. So over off to the right hand side, I am going to write 42 times 1. We all know that any number times 1 is itself. So in this instance, 42 times 1 is 42. However, if I don't know what 42 times 2 is, all I have to do is use addition to be able to solve. So 42, and I'm going to add another group of 42. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. This answer right here tells me that that is equivalent to 42 times 2. Now, I don't know what 42 times 3 is off the top of my head, but all I have to use again is another group of 42 to figure it out. 4 plus 2 is 6. 8 plus 4 is 12. Therefore, I know 42 times 3 equals 126. Now, I also do not know what 42 times 4 is off the top of my head. In order to figure that out, again, I'm going to add another group of 42. So, 6 plus 2 is 8. 2 plus 4 is 6. Carry down my 1. That is equivalent to 42 times 4. At this point, I want to look up and look off to my left-hand side at my quadruple digit dividend again and take a peek if I'm getting close to the first three numbers that I underlined, which would be 235. Come back over to where I was doing my repetitive addition or my multiplication, and I'm at 168. I know I'm getting close to it, but I'm not there yet. So I'm going to go ahead and add another group of 42 to figure out what 42 times 5 is. 8 plus 2 is 10. Carry my 10. 1 plus 6 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. Carry my 10. 1 plus 1 is 2. Therefore, 42 times 5 is equal to 210. I see that I'm getting close to my quadruple digit dividend, the first three value, but I'm not quite there yet. So I kind of want to add another group of 42 to figure out what 42 times 6 is. So I'm going to go ahead and add my next group of 42. 0 plus 2 is 2. 1 plus 4 is 5. carry down my 2. Therefore, 252 is the answer for 42 times 6. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop multiplying for right now. I think I'm actually ready to start solving. So in using partial quotient, we are going to use the opposite operation of division, which is multiplication. Therefore, I'm actually going to be using multiplication to solve to get my two partial quotients. First things first, I'm going to pull out my 42, which is my double-digit divisor, and it's going to become my first factor in my, multiplication problem. So what I'm going to try to do is take 42 times blank gets me as close to 2,352 as possible. This is why we spent time ahead of time figuring out my multiples of 42. As I come over here and I'm looking down, remember I'm wanting to get as close to 235 as possible. Then we will use the powers of 10 to get it as close to 2,352 as possible. As I come down here, I see 84, 126, 168, 210, and 252. If I would take 252, that is going to go over my 235. If I would multiply 42 by 60, that would give me 2,520, which is going to be way over my 2,352. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use 42 times 5. We're going to start there. So 42 times 5 is 210. Now this is where the multiples of 10 or powers of 10 come into play. 42 times 5 is 210. 42 times 50 would be 2,100. 50, which becomes your second factor in your multiplication problem, is your first partial quotient. You want to make sure you write your partial quotient up here. Now what we're going to do, because there's leftover, we are going to have to do another multiplication problem. Before that, we need to figure out our difference between 2,352 and 2,100. 2 minus 0 is 2. 5 minus 0 is 5. 3 minus 1 is 2. Now what I'm going to do is again pull out my double-digit divisor, which is 42, and I have to figure out 42 times blank will get me as close to or exactly to 252. Again, as I stated earlier, I do not know my multiples of 42, do not have them memorized, so I'm going to use my work that I put in the beginning. So 42 times 1 is 42, 42 times 2 is 84, 42 times 3 is 126, 42 times 4 is 168, 42 times 5 is 210, 42 times 6 is 252. Excellent. So 42 times 6 equals 252. I just now solved my second partial quotient, which is 6. Make sure that everything cancels out. 252 minus 252 is 0. Now if I look above, 2,352, which is your quadruple-digit dividend, divided by your double-digit divisor, which is 42, equals to be 50 plus 6 is 56. So your answer is 56. One thing that I always like to do is to double check to make sure that I solve correctly. One way you can do that, if division is your opposite operation, is multiplication, I'm going to use multiplication to check my answer. So I'm going to take my double-digit divisor, which is 42, and it's going to become my first factor in my multiplication problem. Second part, I'm going to take my quotient, which is going to become my second factor in my multiplication problem. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger on my second factor, 10's place value, because first of all, I have to multiply my 1's place value by my first factor 1's place value. So 2 times 6 is 12, carry my 1. Now I'm going to take my first factor 10's place value and multiply it by my second factor 1's place value. 4 times 6 is 24. Add 1 is 25. Now I took my second factor 1's value and already multiplied it by my first factor. So now I'm ready to move over. Because I did that, I cross it out and I place a 0 down below my first partial factor 1's value. Now I'm going to take my first factor 1's value, which is 2, and multiply it by my second factor 10's value. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry my 1. Now I'm going to take my first factor 10's value, which is 4, and multiply it by my second factor 10's value, which is 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 plus 1 is 21. Now what I'm going to do is add my two partial products to get my final product. 2 plus 0 is 2. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 1 is 3. Carry down my thousands. My answer is 2,352. I take a look back up here. That is correct. So we solved correctly using partial quotient.